Turn your mind on and your TV off. It's time to hear the real truth behind what's really going on. Join Tia Severino, an advocate for truth, freedom, and spiritual growth, as she explores the real story behind what we are made to believe on her show, The People's Truth. In the next hour, you'll be exposed to shocking revelations, to lies you have believed in all your life. Together with her guests, she will unravel the facts behind the current events, health, wellness, faith, justice, and more. As Orwell said, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Join the conversation, leave a comment, or call in live 678-495-4345. Don't forget to like, share, and help spread the great message out. And now, here's Tia Severino.
Hello, and welcome to The People's Truth with Tia Severino, where we dig deep into the issues that are really affecting our world. In this episode, Oh Canada, we're going to be talking with Professor Chris Shaw and trucker Lloyd about, I think, Brubacher? Yes, Lloyd Brubacher, later in the show about what is going on up there in Canada. If you've been watching, like me, over the last month, the things that unfolded with the convoy that started and went across the country, the convoy to Ottawa, what they were calling the Freedom Convoy, the trucker protests that shut down, quote unquote, shut down the Ottawa city and sparked similar protests around the country, including several border blockades and some other trucker protests that have kind of sprung up around the world. Nobody's got it harder than the people up in Canada right now, except for maybe, I don't know what, North Korea, Australia, and a few other places where China, maybe where it's really, really, really bad. It looks like there is a totalitarian dictatorship being set up there where I'm sure that a lot of people in Canada have felt like over the last couple of years that their freedoms were being eroded away. But certainly in the last month, they've come to the stark realization that not only were they being eroded away, but that process has accelerated. So Chris Shaw, my guest today, is a professor of ophthalmology and visual sciences, cross appointments in programs of experimental medicine and neuroscience. He runs a laboratory looking for early biomarkers for ALS. He's a co-chair of the CCCA Scientific Advisory Board and author of over 156 peer-reviewed papers, 3 books, numerous book chapters and reviews. He trained as a medic, and he has 5 children from ages 2 to 31. Chris, welcome to the show. You have been one of the pioneers really looking into the problem with the aluminum in the childhood, and so I've seen you speak before when you came here to Atlanta for One Conversation, the event that Shannon Kroner put together, and I have been following your work for quite some time. So it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tia. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
So for anybody that has no idea what we're talking about, can you kind of just briefly explain how I really want to focus in on the thing that probably brought you the most negative attention, which is your investigation into aluminum in and if it sounds like, I don't know, I'm being silly a little bit when I say the you-know-whats, it's because we've got to stay on social media, even though we hate it here. We've got to stay in these formats where we can reach large amounts of people. And if we use the word for the you-know-whats, then they automatically, with their little AI programs, go, whoop, flag that video. So when I refer to the you-know-whats, you know what I'm talking about, and so does our audience. So tell the audience about how you kind of stumbled across the work that you've done, how you kind of got to the conclusions that you got to with that.
Well, Tia, as you stated in your introduction, I'm a neuroscientist, and my primary focus for many years was Lou Gehrig's disease, also known as ALS. And we were following a particular cluster of ALS on the island of Guam.
Wow.
which at one point in the 50s and 60s was like 500 times higher than in North America. And that becomes intriguing because what's going on in Guam that made it such a wave of ALS and Parkinson's, by the way. And we were looking at it. We started looking at various toxins. We considered gene toxin interactions, a whole bunch of things. And we then decided, well, it was really hard to do it because Guam after the World War II and in the 50s was a very toxic place, and they could have been a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, well, maybe if we find another cluster somewhere else, maybe that'll give us a clue what's going on in Guam, and then maybe that's a universal thing that you'll find elsewhere. Mm-hmm. That may be the cause of Lou Gehrig's disease and Parkinson's disease, at least in part. Mm-hmm. And we started looking at Gulf War syndrome. The Gulf War syndrome, as you know, it affected a lot of service people, Americans, Canadians, British, others that went to the first Gulf War. And there were many,
some that never went there, some that never actually.
That's the key, and a whole bunch that never went there. Mm-hmm. And so you can eliminate oil well fires because people who hadn't gone got it. You can eliminate nerve gas because people who et cetera. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that jumped out at us when we were looking at this cluster was that there was, for all the soldiers who were even considering or being considered for deployment, they got a lot of you-know-whats. Okay, so a lot of you-know-whats contain a lot of aluminum, and they also got the anthrax you-know-what, and those kind of things. We thought, well, is there anything to this that could, you-know-whats could actually have a role in triggering motor neuron degeneration? Mm-hmm. And our first reaction at the time, because in graduate school I learned that you-know-whats are always safe and effective, and my graduate student at the time, a guy named Mike Petrick, he had learned in the experimental medicine program that he was in that you-know-whats are always safe and effective. So we thought, well, probably can't be that, but we're scientists, and so we're just going to look and just then we'll eliminate that. We'll go on to something else. And we simply did a simple experiment. We took some mice, and we, that were the equivalent mouse age for young males, and they were male mice, and they were statistically chosen to be the right numbers to be able to generate statistics. Mm-hmm. And to our surprise, and then we gave them aluminum hydroxide by injection. And we compared it to squalene, and compared it to other things. There was a control group, which you'll notice that CDC doesn't normally have. Amongst the drug companies that they do a lot of the so-called research, and to our surprise, and we were surprised, we began to see motor deficits. Mm-hmm. And to the what, this was again just being aluminum hydroxide. And then when we began to look at the histology, in other words, the cellular level analysis of the mice, we discovered that they'd lost a lot of motor neurons. So that intrigued us because up to that point, we had never considered that, we knew aluminum could be toxic, but again, in context to an injectable form of aluminum, which of course many of the you-know-whats have, we began to get curious. And we thought, well, that's interesting. People in the government, people in the Defense Department in the United States, people in other agencies will say, oh, geez, who knew? You-know-whats have aluminum, maybe they shouldn't. And after that, it was just crickets, no response at all. The WHO said, well, the study was very flawed, and, okay, then do your own, WHO. And CDC ignored it, and various other agencies ignored it and said, well, that's kind of a weird response. You'd think if someone came forward and said, there's this thing that you're putting in you-know-whats that could actually harm you, maybe somebody in some government agency would, prick up their ears and go, oh, well, gee, we'll take a look at that. We'll take it from here. No, nothing of the sort. No. And then we did it again. We got the same results the second time. And this is definitely interesting. And about that time, we started working with an organization out of McLean, Virginia, not the CIA, by the way. It was a private funder who basically wanted to follow up with what aluminum might be doing. Mm-hmm. And then we started looking at younger mice, very young mice, sometimes early postnatal age. And we found a lot of behavioral disturbances that, again, it kind of implicated perhaps you-know-whats were not so great, especially when you give a lot of them early in development. So you could see an impact both in adult animals and as well as young animals. And this mirrored very much the kind of stuff that Romain Guérardi in Paris and his group were starting to see with a disorder called myofasciitis. And there was a group in Tel Aviv with Yehuda Schoenfeld that was seeing much the same sort of thing. And Chris Exley's group in London, and in Kiel, I can't remember exactly where they are. But anyway, they were seeing kind of the same sort of thing in their theoretical analyses. and realizing that aluminum is pretty toxic stuff. And, we knew that, but we didn't realize that the amount in the you-know-what could actually do harm if it was given repeatedly. And it can. And of course, the conventional wisdom is, no, it's so tiny it can't possibly do anything to you. Because that's, the amount of you-know-what's or the amount of aluminum in a you-know-what is the same as in a cup of tea, which is true. But the Girardi group has since demonstrated fairly conclusively that it has a totally different trajectory in the body. So when you inject a you-know-what, it does not follow the same path it would follow if you ate it or even inhaled it.
Right.
So that intrigued us. And of course, as we delved into it more and more, we began to get more and more pushback, basically, at the stage where you begin to be described as an anti-vaxxer or anti-you-know-whether, with most people. Well, that's kind of odd because, we never said anything about that. And there was one point where a colleague of mine, Lucia Tomlanovic, who was first author in a lot of our work, we wrote a grant together to the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And we said, listen, aluminum seems to be toxic across the board, however you get it, whether you inhale it or inject it or swallow it. There are different circumstances involved in all of those. But let's see how toxic this stuff is, and let's do a full analysis of this across the board, and then look at animals of different ages and really find out what's going on. And the review panel from the CIHR came back and said, well, it's not really interesting because Andy Wakefield was debunked. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. There's no aluminum in what Andy Wakefield was talking about. The MMM shot has no aluminum in it at all. So therefore, why are we being criticized for something that has no relevance? Mm-hmm. And then we began to realize that at that point, there was something bigger at play here than just a little scientific dispute. That there was actually an attempt to suppress this line of research.
Right.
And again, then we found other funding, but that has been the kind of a constant that all of us who've been, who've dared to dabble in this area have found, that this is a forbidden area of research.
Right.
You are questioning you-know-whats, and there are very powerful interests that don't want you-know-what's questioned. Yeah. And that became really, really clear. And as we delved into it more and more, that became increasingly clear. There were comments my chairperson would give me saying, well, I'd kind of leave that area if I were you, and I didn't, because I'm one of those people. But when I get an interesting scientific idea, it's like a sweater with a thread loose. I'll just pull on it and see where it goes. Right. And of course, had I been a little smarter, I probably wouldn't have done that. And I know researchers who've looked at aluminum; they've been told very point blank to leave it. And so, and that's ultimately, as you know, what happened to Chris Exley and led to his exit from Keele University.
Right.
And the others have had all the same sort of thing. And so that followed a series of other events, being basically slammed for being an anti-vaxxer. Keele University basically letting Exley go. Girardi's credentials being attacked. Schoenfeld's credentials being attacked. Luis Lujan in Spain, who did exactly the same study we did, except he did it on sheep. So it crosses the species barrier. Clearly, when aluminum in what's can have an impact on any mammal,
any life form, right?
Well, I don't know about any. Probably, yeah. But at least in mammal.
Do you think it's good for plants? I mean, we could do some
experiments. No, and it's not. And there's no evidence in the scientific literature, or very scant evidence, that it actually has any beneficial effect. And Chris Exley has, clearly stated, and he's quite correct, that aluminum did not, co-evolve with humans or any land-based animals or anything really on Earth, because it's normally complexed into very, very insoluble forms. And so, you can even take a piece of jadeite, which is basically aluminum silicate, and you can put it in your mouth and lick on it all day long, and it's not going to do anything to you. Whereas if you take aluminum out, it's very inert, and most of aluminum has been throughout geological history. Right. So if you start, with the Industrial Revolution, aluminum started to be extracted from bauxite and other minerals, and it started to go into everything. And today, Exley has described it, as the age of aluminum. It's everywhere.
Right.
And most of it is not going to be a big problem, but the injectable aluminum becomes a particular problem, and because of the route it takes within the body.
Right. Because of the reaction that the immune system has to it, because it really provokes inflammation. It sets the immune system on fire.
Basically, and that's what it's designed to do.
Exactly.
That's exactly
why they put it in. We got it. We're coming up on a break, so I don't want to cut you off. We are coming up on a break. I just wanted to say something in relation to what you've just shared. For folks that are out there who hear the phrase "follow the science" or "believe the scientists," this is a perfect example of why that approach falls short. Because here you have a scientist telling you he is making incredible discoveries, and because it might have something to do with you-know-whats that might put a bad light on you-know-what, he's basically not able to continue with the funding, and any scientist that is trying to look into you-know-what or any potential harm that they might cause is basically being blacklisted from doing any kind of funding. You can't do science without funding, and you can't publish science without the scientific community's backing. So that is why we are where we are today. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up with Professor Shaw on what has been happening to him personally, legally, in the state that he's living in, the tyrannical state of Canada, or the country, I should say, after the break.
If this content resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel at uimedianetwork.org to stay updated with our uncensored shows. Also, like and follow us at UI Media Network on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and almost all your favorite podcasting platforms. Most importantly, if you're being censored on social media, write to us at contact@uimedianetwork.org to get your message out. And remember, keep raising that frequency.
Welcome back to The People's Truth with Tia Severino. My guest today, Chris Shaw, Professor Chris Shaw, is up there in Canada, where he has been working really hard over the years doing research into the causes of ALS and other things. And we just talked about some of the research that he's done, and what I'd like to go into now is, Chris, please, what is going on with you right now in Canada? I know that the place has gone completely mad. You've got Fidel Jr. over here, calling for martial law, and you want freedom? Well, I'm gonna dictate harder what you have to do as Canadians. So, talk to us. Where are you at right now with your career, and what's been going on?
Well, my academic career is on hold. I got put on unpaid leave back in December. We'd been told it was coming. The hospital area where I work at Vancouver General Hospital, I'm down the street from it, but I'm still within their zone. We're basically told that we were supposed to declare our status, and I told them it's none of their business what my status is. And then they came down a few weeks later and said, okay, here are your choices. And there's only one. You can be fired, or you can take the you-know-whats for COVID. And I declined to do that, and had a couple of chats with my chairman, who basically said, well, my hands are tied, the standard kind of we got to make the trains run on time. And so therefore I'm putting you on unpaid suspension, and in due course, human resources at the university will process you out. Basically you're going to be terminated. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because, A, we have a big project on Lou Gehrig's disease. And number two, I don't think this is warranted, considering that I had COVID-19 back in the summer of 2020. I was asymptomatic, but I know from serology that I had it. And therefore, if anything, the you-know-whats could actually harm me. I could get antibody-dependent enhancement, which is very serious. I could get other reactions to it. And I just declined. And so I've been on unpaid leave since December, which is fine. I'm not going to risk my life for my job. But that happened to a lot of people. Right now they're talking about like some 4,000 healthcare workers in British Columbia, where I live, who are also being fired. We're talking about a lot of other police officers that I know, people in the army. They're being kicked out. People in the police are being kicked out. People who will not accept these mandates. And the Vancouver Coastal Health mandate was particularly odious because the head of that organization was caught on a video basically acknowledging that it had nothing to do with the disease spread, and it had nothing to do with health measures. those measures were simply to incentivize people who were not vaccinated to go get the shots.
Wow.
We have her on video. So that was pretty, I mean, and she was talking to a group of doctors, and someone said, by the way, how many people who are unvaccinated are actually spreading the disease? And she said, well, none. No, they're not spreading it in care homes, not spreading in hospitals, not spreading in restaurants or pubs. It's not an issue. We just want to make people take it.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so, I mean, and since then, the evidence that the what's do very little to actually prevent transmission of disease. You can still catch it, obviously. We now know, for example, in Ontario, that the people hospitalized with COVID often have 2 or 3 what's. And they are actually, the numbers exceed those who are not vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So these are not only neutral, they are actually harmful to a lot of people. And, the adverse effects that have come from the what's exceed anything in the last 70 years from any other what's combined. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But of course, and we have our health official here, a doctor named Bonnie Henry, who basically holds to the line, there's no such thing as natural immunity, or it's so far inferior to, induced immunity that it's ridiculous. So even if you have the disease, you should get another what. And a lot of us, I know, it's, you look at this kind of stuff and you shake your head and you think, did you really say that? Did you actually go to medical school? Honestly, did you miss that whole thing on immunology? How is that possible?
Did you?
And yet, and they with a straight face, they say that.
Wait a minute.
And so,
did you catch the comedian that came out? I think her name was Heather something. Came out on stage and said, "I got 3, and I got the I got the first 2, and I got the booster. Also got the shingle shot, and I got and Jesus loves me the most." And then falls down, cracks her head.
Yeah, I heard about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, cracks her head. Passes out on. It was like instant. Like an instant answer from God, because I believe she was mocking God, and a lot of people have said that she was struck down for her blasphemy. But this young lady went on with Dr. Drew. She was talking to Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew told her that she should go ahead. She's like, I don't think I'm going to get the 4th booster. Said, well, you probably should. Like, what? She literally cracked her head open, and you're still saying that she should. It's madness.
It's tremendous. So here in Canada now, I'm going to go back to what's happening here. So the different provinces had different regulations, a lot of mandates. For example, here in British Columbia, which is right now the worst of the entire country. We're not even talking about the federal level right now, but at the provincial level, British Columbia, you cannot go into a restaurant without your what's. You have a little passport. You cannot. Even though Patricia Daly, the health officer, admitted that it doesn't matter, you can't go into any kind of public place. Wow. So you're turned into a second-class citizen. At the federal level, you cannot fly out of this country unless you have the what passport. Wow. So if I wanted to cross the border, I would have to drive. Now, fortunately, I have dual nationality. I can go to the United States. But Canadians who don't have that privilege basically can't. They cannot get out of this country. Yeah, so that's how bad it is. Wow. And so the country has gone, and I hate to say this because I've lived here a long time and I'm very fond of Canada. It has gone into full-bore fascism. There's no other way to describe it. It has become, and Pierre, the dad, the official dad of Justin Trudeau, the prime minister, basically is acting like a tin pot dictator. And the only thing that stopped him from bringing in the so-called Emergencies Act, which have basically put the country under martial law, was some opposition in our Senate. We have a 2-level parliament. It's not like your Senate because it's not elected, but we have a 2-level parliament, and the Senate was probably or possibly going to reject it. And the most amazing thing is one member of the Conservative Party, in Canada, we're ruled by the Liberal Party at the moment. The Conservative Party, some member got up and said, let's talk about Klaus Schwab. And let's talk about the role that Justin Trudeau has as one of the young leaders who was trained by Klaus Schwab. And let's talk about Klaus Schwab saying that the Canadian cabinet, including Trudeau, obviously, has been totally compromised.
Yeah, over 50% of the cabinet is his.
That's right. And Yeah, and some of the opposition have too, which one of his coalition partner from a party called the NDP.
I'm sorry. We're having technical difficulties.
Yeah, exactly. Except the problem is 37 million people could have seen that because they were having technical difficulties, but we saw that too. And all of a sudden, this has gone around the world. Oh, so you're having technical difficulties because you don't want to disclose that you guys are basically the sock puppets. Yeah, you're sock puppets, and you're controlled by Klaus Schwab with his World Economic Forum agenda. And we know what that.
You'll own nothing, and you'll
be happy. Yeah, and digital control of everything, and the social credit. Where all your money is. Like in China. So basically, what they're trying to do here is bring in kind of a Chinese system.
Wow.
So you could call it fascism, you could call it communism, but it's totalitarian, whatever it is.
Yep.
And and again, we're still under a lot of these things. The Emergencies Act was revoked, but that was Trudeau panicking, I think, and deciding that he had to soft pedal it a little bit because the narrative is literally falling apart day by day.
Yeah.
Most of the provinces, except for British Columbia, we don't know why, most of the provinces have relaxed a lot of the mandates.
Right.
But if they could bring it back, they certainly would. So this is revealed one more time that for your American listeners, you think this is a democratic country up here. It used to be. Well, no, it hasn't actually. Right. We've always been on the edge of having some government and another decide to do this kind of stuff. And it was Justin's daddy who tried this kind of stuff back in 1970. He brought in what's called the War Measures Act to suppress what he considered a terrorist group in Quebec, of which there were maybe 10. And he put the War Measures Act across the entire country. So we have a bad history with this kind of stuff, and we're doing it again. They were at one point talking about in Quebec, the province of Quebec, about fining people who wouldn't take the you-know-whats.
Wow.
In other words, and not letting them out of the house, and basically house arrest for people who refuse the you-know-whats. And there's always been the concern that they will take your children. There's always been the concern that people will get vanished to re-education camps.
Right.
And not that far-fetched. No, it's
not. And people need to realize that when we talk about the atrocities that happened in Germany in the 1940s, but we forget, I should say, a lot of people forget that didn't happen. It didn't just all of a sudden start happening in 1941, 42, 43, 44. No. There was a slow crawl towards it, and there was a lot of false flags, and there was a lot of power grabbing going on before that, and the leader, I don't even want to say his name because that will also get us flagged. Their leader basically created chaos in the streets with his thugs and then demanded extraordinary powers in order to make it stop, was granted those extraordinary powers, and they never got their republic back. They never got their republic back. It took war. And then the other thing is that you had people that were good people that were involved in absolute atrocities because of this mentality of the order followers and the compliant citizenry, because it wasn't just the Gestapo or the browncoats that were, they couldn't have done it by themselves. They had to have a compliant citizenry who was willing to turn in their neighbors. So,
and very, very much the same here. And a lot of people,
warning signs.
Well, a lot of people here, drank the Kool-Aid, and Trudeau kind of acknowledged about a month ago, he had a little, unscripted interview with a television station in Quebec. Basically, he said something along the lines of, what are we going to do with those people? They're misogynist, they're racist, they don't believe in science. Why do we tolerate them? Why don't we just do something with them?
I heard that.
That sounds disturbingly familiar. I come from a Jewish family. When you hear people talking about doing something with those people,
right?
The flags go up because this is again in history.
Because these are the signs, and it is true that we are. If we don't constantly apply vigilance, this is the direction that all governments turn to. They want more and more power, more and more power. I'm so sorry. We've got to take a break. For those that are listening at home, I know you hear some pipping and chirping in the background. That's the cute little cutie pie of Professor Shaw's, and we don't mind that at all. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk to Lloyd Brubacher, Canadian trucker. Chris, stick around. We're going to bring you back in the final segment of the show. We've got a couple of questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. But for now, take a look at this, and we'll be back.
The time to defy the modern agenda is now. UI Media Network presents Frequency Wars, an explosive new series that examines contentious subject matter pursuing us beyond our five senses. This weekly series discovers the intricacies of imposing issues that challenge our daily existence and question humanity. Provocative and intriguing, we confront the issues and conflicts affecting us on a global scale. Manipulation, manpower, or others simply controlling your mentality. The commentary and guests will shift our paradigm and defy the status quo.
In 1979, the so-called father of Israeli intelligence, a guy called Issa Harel, told an American journalist that there was going to be an Islamic attack on New York's biggest building.
Bill Gates, he is publicly saying we should consider microchipping all of humanity so we can track their vaccination status.
What you see in movies like The Avengers, that's actually true.
What will you believe? Frequency Wars challenges perception to take back your sovereignty. The power and purpose are greater than any of us, but we will test it all. Frequency Wars, the next revolution.
Welcome back to The People's Truth with Tia Severino. If you're like me, you watched the convoy to Ottawa, the Freedom Convoy, unfold over the last month, and we're happily cheering on those patriots who were wanting to stand up for their freedom, for not only for their rights to travel and to earn a living and to be able to do so without the you-know-what. They were also fighting for children, for the average Canadian to be free from tyrannical overreach that the government up there has been taking. And I got a special place in my heart for truckers. I've had some very close friends. I have a very close friend of mine actually who just passed away, was a trucker, and I feel like he's up in heaven right now, kind of, blowing that big horn, just proud as can be to see his fellow truckers stepping up, fighting for freedom. So I wanted to talk to one of the truckers that was not necessarily an organizer, but just one of the good folks that heard something was going on and said, I want to stand up for freedom. And so I'm going to bring on Lloyd Brubacher. Am I saying your name correctly, sir? Lloyd, welcome to the show.
Yes, you are. Yep.
Awesome. Lloyd, welcome. How long have you been, tell folks who you are and where you come from, and how long have you been trucking, sir?
I'm Lloyd Brubacher. I don't know, a lot of guys know me as a false eared guy on social media. And in April, it'll be 3 years that I'm in the truck now.
You can do me a favor, sir, and kind of position your camera so that your head is a little higher up there. Yeah, and kind of try and hold it still if you can. That's better. I just want my viewers to be able to see your face and not just the top of your head. Perfect. Much better. That's a better way to see the whole thing. So you've been driving the big rig for how long, man?
It'll be 3 years in April.
Okay. And
not very long.
What attracted you to that job, to that occupation?
Ever since I was about 4 years old, I had an accident at 4 years old, and I was sitting in the hospital on the benches there because I wasn't allowed to go home, and I'd watch the big trucks roll by the hospital windows, and ever since that I always knew I was going to get there somehow.
Wow. Okay, so take me back month and a half ago. You started to hear the stirrings. Truckers are going to do it. Now, there's been rumblings before. I don't know if there has been up there in Canada. I think you guys did. There was a trucker protest back in, 70s or something like that. But I'd been hearing rumblings here in America about doing some kind of a protest all the way back in the fall of 2020 is when I started hearing rumbling. So I'd been paying attention to what was going on with the truckers for a while because I want to make sure that my pantry is stocked, because when you guys stop, everything stops, and people really need to understand that. If you like having food in your belly, think a trucker, because it's not just the grocery stores, it's the restaurants that are, you just simply would not eat if it wasn't for truckers. In fact, you wouldn't do much of anything because everything that you get in the store is trucked in. So I've been paying attention to this. So take me back to when you started to hear, oh, wow, there's something happening, and talk to me about what made you decide to get involved and to join the convoy and go to Ottawa.
I think it was around the middle of January when I first started hearing about it. And the first place I noticed it was on social media. I kind of followed it along. I didn't really know if it was actually going to happen or not, but as the days went by, you could tell that there was definitely something in the works. It was just a matter of getting everything lined up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things you don't really know how to explain it. You just have that gut feeling that this is your time to shine, or whatever you want to call it. I had that gut feeling, and I didn't know how I was gonna get involved, or if I ever was gonna get involved. But I had that gut feeling that I should be a part of this.
Nice.
And my boss was actually kind enough to let me take his truck down and be a part of the convoy in Ottawa, which that was one hell of an experience.
So what was it like crossing the country? What was it like on the way there? Because I know that you guys had people lined up on the sides of the freeways with Canadian signs. I mean, we're talking hundreds and thousands of people that came out and filled the overpasses and were there to meet you guys whenever you stop and give you that. What was that feeling like?
Because I'm from Ontario, I didn't see as much as a lot of people did, but by the time we got closer to Ottawa, so we started off Friday, and then we drove all day Friday, and we were out at Ottawa then for the night. And by the time we got close to Ottawa, it was something you can't really explain. People lined the overpasses, and they all had their flags, and there was people on the side of the road. It still gives me shivers to talk about it. Like, I'm not much of a crier, but that shit made me cry.
Wow. And it wasn't summer. I mean, I think about, I get irritated when when it's below freezing here in Georgia, which that's only a few times a year. I can't imagine the fortitude that these people had to go out in below zero temperatures. That really says something, doesn't it? Doesn't it, to have people out in that kind of numbers just to see you guys drive by? Wow, just to see you drive by.
Yeah, because there was a couple nights it was minus 30 Celsius. And people lined the side of the road or the overpass or wherever they could find a spot to stand.
Wow, that's amazing. So then when you got to Ottawa, what was it like when you guys got there, when you got into the city? Because, I heard that the police were actually really friendly and helping kind of direct where you guys could stay, where you could be. It didn't seem like it was nobody was causing any trouble. So what was it like once you got into Ottawa?
So we stopped in, I want to say Cornwall for the night. We parked there, and then we were going to meet up with a bunch of the convoys were coming together to head into the city Saturday morning. So we spent, I think it was 10 or 12 hours trying to get through Ottawa to Parliament. So by midnight Saturday night, we finally parked at Parliament, right in front of Parliament there. But all day, they had been bringing the traffic up to, I forget if it was 1 or 2 intersections close to Parliament Hill. And then when we pulled up to that intersection, you could either turn left and get out of the city, or you were parked there, and that's as far as you could go. Mm-hmm. But then the cops actually asked one of us, there's 3 of us in the convoy that I went down, that we drove together, and they asked one of the drivers where we wanted to be, and this was at midnight Saturday night. He said, well, we want to get as close to Parliament as possible. So the cops actually moved the barriers and escorted us in right to the front line on Parliament Hill.
Wow. And you guys were there for 3 weeks, no incidents, no violence. People were cleaning up the trash. There was bouncy castles for kids. There was food tents set up. They were feeding the homeless. Crime actually dropped in Ottawa during those 3 weeks, and you left before any of the violence started, with the Ottawa police backed up by what appears to be UN goons. I can't imagine that real Canadian police officers would have been okay with coming in the aggressive manner in which they did for the folks that were there. But you did not witness any of that. You were only there for, how many, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think we were there for 16 days.
Okay.
And no, I never witnessed any of it. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't.
Right.
But what I did witness was the power of the people. I've never seen so many happy people, and we're talking by the millions of people together in one place.
Wow.
Without any kind of violence.
Mm-hmm. And that scared them. You know what? I got to say something. That probably scared them more than if you had gone in with pitchforks and torches, because they know how that's what they want. Actually, they want you to go in with pitchforks and torches so that they can justify the use of force that they really want. They want violence so that they can clamp down, and then it's all justified in their minds. Well, they came at us with pitchforks and torches, so therefore we had to lob cannons at them. We had to protect ourselves, and we had to restore order in the streets, right? So I think it was much more terrifying to them that you came and that you were so peaceful, and that you were so right in your efforts and your desire to approach the government and ask for a redress of grievances, which we're supposed to be able to do in a so-called democracy, which they love to throw that word around, means something completely different for them, right? But you're supposed to be able to go and, how dare Fidel Jr. say, I'll go speak to protesters if I agree with their cause, like Black Lives Matter, or anyone else that's being funded by somebody with a name that starts with S and ends with S. But on that note, we're going to take that final break. When we come back, I'm going to have both Chris and Lloyd. We got a few questions sent in by a viewer, and I got some exciting news for you at the very end, so be sure that you stick around for that right after the break.
We assume, as scientists in a laboratory doing our little thing, that in the great scheme of things, we can manipulate, exploit, and exert dominion over these infectious agents, then we are sadly mistaken. We've seen this with so many infections that we believed we had conquered. No, we haven't. No, we haven't, because they are geared up to survive. And we need to accord these organisms the greatest of respect, not to try and manipulate them in the interests of profiteering with this false claim, this sort of laudable but unfounded claim that we're doing it for the benefit of mankind, because it isn't for the benefit of mankind. The safest thing in this instant would have been to protect the vulnerable, to isolate the vulnerable and allow everybody else to get the infection. Bear in mind, this virus, a respiratory pathogen, should have emerged, peaked, and declined to zero, gone away. But we decided that we'd flatten the curve with these imperfect measures. They don't stop transmission, but they do modify it. So if we social distance, we wear masks, we close schools, for example, we don't stop transmission, but we do modify it, and they flatten the curve. The problem with flattening the curve is that you encourage the emergence of mutant strains of the virus that are more transmissible. If you make it more difficult to be transmitted, strains will emerge that are more successful at transmission. Truth will set you free. There's no question. The truth ultimately will set you free. And it's going to be extremely uncomfortable for a period. But we need to persist. We need to continue doing what we're doing. You need to continue doing what you're doing. You will, and you're doing a wonderful job in getting this information out. And you are educating people in a way that enables them to move forward informed and determined, confident and optimistic, that if they take responsibility for their own health and wellness, their own medical decisions, their own health freedom, those of their children, those of their families, then they will be the survivors. And that's what we need to do.
Thanks for sticking around to watch this episode of The People's Truth with Tia Severino. If you're enjoying this content, you'll want to head over to uimedianetwork.org for other uplifting, insightful, and informative content. We do need your help getting this content out with the social media overlords censoring our every move. So please like, share, and get this word out to your friends, family, and wider social media followers. My guest today is Professor Chris Shaw and Canadian trucker Lloyd Brubacher. We've been talking a little bit about what's been going on up there in Canada. It's quite an interesting scene that's been unfolding, actually terrifying scene, I think, for anyone who loves freedom and who is concerned about the continuation of the beautiful experiment we have here in the West, where the people decide who the rulers are and can have their voices heard by those rulers and may even have some chance to become rulers themselves. And I'm using the word ruler because we know the truth of the matter is these people are installed, but we have the illusion that they are elected, and especially here in the United States, where it looks like there's people that are running the show, but really there's people pulling their strings behind the curtain, and it's the same people pulling the strings behind the curtain in every country around the globe. It's important that people understand that. I think that the last 2 years with the pandemic has really made that evident. When you see every single country across the world doing the same thing, lockstep, okay? Like how within 2 weeks of them declaring a pandemic, suddenly every single retail establishment had the little stand 6 feet apart nonsense on the floors and face coverings and all that stuff. Okay. So welcome back, Chris and Lloyd. I'm glad to have both of you here representing Canada. I have some questions that were sent in by a viewer. And so I'm going to ask them. Oh, gosh. Let's see. For Chris. So for Chris, this is from Lisa. So hi, Lisa. Thank you for connecting me with both of these wonderful gentlemen. Do people suspect that the lifting of COVID rules and restrictions are just a ploy for something worse to come? Perhaps through federal mandates, through a future war, and then using the Emergency Act in Canada. So is there the sense among people in Canada that, well, they're loosening the leash a little bit, but watch out, because the minute we start to trot along like we're just going to do normal life again, they're going to yank that chain back, and we're going to be right back where we started. What are you hearing and what are you feeling from where you're at?
Well, where I live in the Cowichan Valley, which is about 50 miles from Victoria, the capital city of British Columbia, a lot of people feel that. This is kind of like what they call in social media breadcrumbing. They dangle these little things. Oh, we'll loosen this and we'll loosen that. But they're going to bring it back because they can. And we live in a period of state of exception where governments do whatever they want. And this is, the Canadian government maybe more than most, but certainly Joe Biden would like to do the same thing if he could in the United States. We have this tin pot dictator up here who thinks he can do whatever he bloody well wants. And I want to say before going further, we in Canada and indeed around the world owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the truckers, because while I'm in the science group and I'm in a veterans group, we've been trying to break through and say why is the Canadian public so silent? And the truckers, to their enormous credit, found that quiet rage that so many people in Canada were feeling, and they really caused that rage to be exhibited. And as Lloyd said, people were lining the streets, lining the bypasses, lining everything. They were everywhere with their flags. It was an amazing demonstration of how much many Canadians are fed up. I was in a convoy in British Columbia on Vancouver Island that was 70 kilometers long. The day the truckers got into Ottawa, we were getting into Victoria, 70 kilometers long. So there was an enormous support, and the truckers really deserve all the credit for finding that level of anger and frustration with what had been happening. And it finally woke up Canadians. So Lloyd, my hat's off to you, man, because you guys did it. You guys really did it. And you helped everyone understand that what had been going on here was absolute garbage, and it was dictatorial. And, I think you've woken up democracy in this country, or the spirit of democracy.
Well, I would agree. What you've woken up the world is really what's going on, because people realize that they're not alone in feeling this way. And what happens when you have people come out en masse like that, not only in the city where the protest is happening, but across the country. I mean, people that they probably traveled from miles away to stand on the side of the freeway just for the chance to wave at the truckers when they go by. That had to be so frightening. And the fact that it was a peaceful demonstration, and that there was no violence. But it's got to be absolutely terrifying, because it really does show the numbers. It really does show the numbers. And so my hat is also off to the truckers. God, I love you guys. You are, like I said, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now if you guys weren't rolling the roads. And then also bringing it to the surface and really showing the unity and the desire of the masses to have freedom.
And who knew the government of the day was so terrified of bouncy castles? Now we know.
Right. Right.
And our media, I have to say, our media was despicable in their coverage. They were looking for anything to damn the truckers and the supporters, and they were desperately seeking things. and failing because, as you said, the truckers were nonviolent. They were peaceful. They were cleaning up the streets. They were feeding people. And they said, oh, it's just a bunch of alt-right, white folks. No, there were Sikh protesters. There were black protesters. There were Asian protesters. It is multidimensional, multiracial, multi-ethnic.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people. And to call it just a white racist thing is complete garbage. And yet our national media were basically saying that over and over again.
Right.
And none of it was true. And it is shocking to watch your media completely lie to the people. I felt we were dealing with Pravda back in the old days of the Soviet Union. It was ridiculous.
Okay.
So,
I got a question for Lloyd. Okay. So, Lloyd, what advice do you have for the American truckers that are currently en route to D.C.? What would you say? Remain calm at all times? Hold on a second. I'm trying to read the question. Most people confronting from opposition are likely planted, and are truckers supporters prepared to be arrested similar to the ones in Canada? Okay, so basically, what is your message to your American counterparts? And I suppose that this would also go to any truckee, I think they call them truckies down in Australia. What advice would you have as far as other truckers go?
The best thing to do is just stand your ground, hold the line, and remain calm. Like, there's so many scare tactics that they used on us.
Right.
And the worst thing you can do is let that shit get into your head, because I did. I didn't know some mornings where I would wake up next, but the more you let that work in your mind, the more it gets to you. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you are. Yeah.
And I could be wrong, but do I detect a little bit of an Irish accent there? You kind of am I making things up in my own mind, or?
No, I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I come from an old order Mennonite community, so I used to drive horse and buggy.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So,
yes, I think I heard that you were a Mennonite. Wow, so you went from horses and buggies to big rig. What? Well, it's not that much different, is it?
Not really.
You're just pulling a load, right? With horsepower. Yay. Okay. So you guys, amazing show. It was really, really good to have you both on. Chris, for those that are watching that want to find your work on the aluminum and the you-know-whats and everything like that, where can people find you to follow your work and to just keep up with you?
Look, people can certainly write to me. I think you have my email contact. We have, you can find us on the web, obviously, because we published a lot. And but please, and if anyone has questions or wants to write to me, feel free to do so. I'm happy to take questions from anybody.
Okay. Last question for Lloyd. What's the plan? Are you guys? Has there been any discussion or chatter among the folks that were participating in the Ottawa protest about what they're going to do next? What is there any next moves, or is it a situation where the so-called organizers have been thrown in jail, and you're like without a direction, or is there? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's next for you guys? Is there anything in the works, or is there kind of a sense of now you've awakened the Canadians, it's their turn to stand up for freedom? Where are you at with that?
Most of the organizers are still behind bars at this point. There's one of them that got out and went home, but he's no longer allowed to be anywhere near Ottawa or have anything to do with a protest.
Wow.
But at this point, everything's just kind of on the down low to see what the next step is, right?
Well, I got a feeling you guys have something up your sleeve, and I'll be watching to see what that is. We certainly can't give up now, because we have put them back on their heels, and they're really showing what they're about, what they're doing and what their intentions are. So thank you so much for exposing them like that. And I appreciate both of you guys coming on the show, both of you gentlemen coming on the show today. For those that are still watching at home, I want to tell you about the event that I'm planning to do in June here in Atlanta. It's called Next Steps. And we have a tremendous list of amazing speakers. It's going to be 7 workshops, and we're launching the UI Media Awards, so you will not want to miss it. You can go to next-steps.info to find out more information and to purchase tickets that are now on sale. And I hope to see you in Atlanta, June 3rd and 4th. Until next time, this is Tia Severino with The People's Truth. Take care of yourself, and I love you. See you soon.
Whoa, my mind has officially been blown wide open. As yours? Keep sharing the show and join us in our mission to educate the world with uncensored truth. As they say, together we are stronger, our voices louder, and the synergy of our actions more powerful. If you have any comments or questions for Tia and her guests, send us an email at contact@uimedianetwork.org. Until then, stay safe, stay tuned. The UI Media Network and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.